So it's my pleasure to reconvene this session this afternoon um, to hear from, from patients and advocates about our task and about this disorder. I want to begin today by inviting Sara Eggers from the Office of Program and Strategic Analysis at the FDA to talk about the voice of the patient. And do be aware that we are timing these things. We did that earlier this afternoon too, but we will be. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Sara Eggers from FDA in the Office of Strategic Programs, and we're the office that is coordinating the patient-focused drug development initiative that FDA is running. My personal disclaimer is that I'm not a clinical expert in any way. I have learned a tremendous amount myself personally from this experience, and I want to thank everyone in advance who helped in that effort. I am here reporting on behalf of the patients who attended our meeting. So I'm going to first start out by saying that FDA recognizes that CFS and ME is a serious disease or set of diseases for which there are no currently approved FDA therapies. I'm going to be using the term CFS and ME throughout my presentation, again, making no judgment on the causes of the condition. We share in the commitment to facilitate the development of safe and effective drug therapies for CFS and ME, and that's why we did this initiative, and that's why I believe we're here today, is to share that perspective. In April of 2013, we held a public meeting to hear perspectives from patients with CFS and ME and patient representatives, those who care for people with CFS and ME or advocate on behalf of those patients. This was the first meeting conducted as part of our patient-focused drug development program, and if you will oblige me, I'm going to say PFDD from now on because it's a mouthful. This program has provided us and others, I believe, an opportunity to hear directly from patients. The meeting that we conducted on April 25th was part of a larger workshop to explore important issues related to CFS and ME drug development. I'm going to give a little bit of background on the PFDD initiative, and then I'll give an overview of the specific meeting for CFS and ME, and then I'm going to give just the highlights of patient input, particularly as it relates to disease symptoms and impacts on daily life, as that's my understanding what would be likely most relevant to you here today. I do encourage you, though, to not take my word for it today, but to read the report that we have posted. I have a link at the back. I brought a few copies if anyone wants a hard copy and can get to me first. To understand why we're doing patient-focused drug development, a little bit about FDA's benefit risk assessment. When the agency is reviewing drugs for pre-market approval in particular, there is an assessment that has to be done that takes into account a number of factors in weighing the benefits and risks. This is a framework that we have developed, and we are beginning to implement it. I have another resource at the back that can give you more information on this, but I wanted to highlight what those key decision factors are. These 5 things on the left of the grid here. The analysis of the condition, the current treatment options, and then the benefit risk and risk management. And what the first 2 do is provide the regulator with the therapeutic context for weighing the benefits and risks, because that weighing of benefits and risks really depends on how bad the condition is, how serious the condition is, what's available for patients, and how well those current therapies are meeting patients' needs. With that context, then the weighing of the benefits and risks, that thorough expert judgment of what those benefits and risks are, and what can be done in terms of risk management to better understand or manage those risks. With that context in mind, those weighings happen. Patients are uniquely positioned to inform those first 2 rows, that therapeutic context, but the current mechanisms of all the different ways that FDA can engage patients, they typically focus on obtaining patient input in the context of a specific application under review, for example, through an advisory committee meeting. So PFDD offers a more systematic way of gathering patient input on their conditions and treatment options in the broader context without thinking of specific, thinking of a specific application. So we have committed to conducting 20 meetings on specific disease areas in 2013 through 2017. And we hope that these meetings can advance a systematic approach to gathering input. Just a little bit on how we chose CFS and ME. In 2012, we initiated the process by nominating some disease areas. And we got public input through a meeting and through a federal docket, a Federal Register notice. We received over 4,500 comments addressing 90 different diseases, over 90 different diseases. And from that, 16 were selected for our first 3 years of the program. These were published, and in 2015, we'll start another process for that, for the final 2 years. We saw a diversity along the ranges of diseases that we encounter in regulatory decision-making, focusing on disease areas that are chronic, symptomatic, functioning activities of daily living, have few or no therapies, or those that exist do not directly affect how a patient feels, functions, or survives, has important aspects that are not formally captured in clinical trials, et cetera, and CFS and ME fits the bid in many of these categories. And I'll just say that I was delighted that we worked with CFS and ME as our first one. It was such a learning experience and such a great meeting to really serve as a model, really kind of raise the bar for the rest of the meetings that follow. And someone who facilitates many of these meetings, it now makes my brows sweat a little bit more when I have to go into the next ones. So just to show you the meetings that we've done CFS and ME, HIV, lung cancer, and narcolepsy. Next, in 2 weeks, we're doing sickle cell disease, fibromyalgia. We were supposed to do in December, but it was that one day of the government closure. So that will be happening in March, and then a number of other diseases. The meetings all follow a very similar design that is tailored to the context, to the disease context, such as the state of drug development, specific interests of the review division at FDA, and taking into account the patient population, for example, whether it's a diverse patient population, et cetera. The input is generated in multiple ways, and the astute observer will notice that not all of these ways were used in the CFS and ME meeting, but we are continuing to explore more ways that we can get patient input. So at the meeting for CFS and ME, we had a patient panel for different discussion topics who provided some comments. We followed that with facilitated discussion with the patients in the audience. We try to engage web participants, and we have a federal docket that allows people to submit more or detailed comments or comments if they weren't able to attend. Each meeting results in a report that captures that patient input from the multiple streams. And this input supports FDA staff as we're reviewing drugs in those benefit risk assessments that I just talked about, or perhaps when advising drug sponsors in their development program. We believe that the input might support drug development more broadly, for example, helping identify specific areas of unmet need in the patient population, or helping to identify potential outcome measures. So as I mentioned, the CFS and ME meeting on April 25th was part of that 2-day workshop. The day 2 was a much more technical discussion with regulatory industry, clinical, and scientific experts, as well as patients on that day 2. And we have a separate report of day 2 that's underway, so that's forthcoming. The meeting that I'm talking about focused on 2 primary topics. What are the most significant symptoms that you have, and how do what impact do they have on daily life? And what were patients' perspectives on current approaches to treating CFS and ME? As I mentioned, the patient advocate community was so engaged. We had about 70 patient representatives at the meeting, many on the web. We received 228 docket comments. Many of them were in such detail, so informative. The advocates and the patient community also did a lot of preparation in advance of the meeting to help make sure that the patient panelists and all the participants were as, I think, prepared as they could be. It was great. Our summary report posted in September of 2013. And we hope it provides a narrative of the patient's experiences and perspectives in a way that's accessible to FDA staff. It is a snapshot in time of the story that patients collectively told us. We believe it reflects the content of the meeting and the docket submission. So it's not meant to be reflective of the entire patient population. We know that that there's a very self-selected group who could come to the meeting and submit to the dockets, and we're aware of that, but we got a snapshot in time of the patient's perspectives in their own words as much as possible. I'm going to get into some key themes, and then I'll get into some specific things. So the key themes is that many participants said that they knew the specific time in their lives when their symptoms began, whether it was after a specific illness or just waking up one day and not feeling good. They stress that CFS and ME is much more than simply feeling fatigued. In both the meeting and through the docket comments, more than 50 symptoms were reported, both cognitive and physical manifestations. Post-exertional malaise, or I'm going to call it now a crash because that's the word that the patients used, is an exacerbation of symptoms. And I'm going to be separating it out from a symptom because they did stress that it's hitting us with all symptoms, making them worse. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. The meeting reiterated the devastating toll that the disease can take on patients and families. Some who called themselves the working ill reported still being able to function in society, go to work, but that's about all they could do in many cases, while others reported that they were virtually housebound or bedbound. Many described themselves as being successful professionals or students before, but now struggle with many aspects of day-to-day living. Patients use a complex regimen of drug and non-drug therapies to treat their disease or manage their symptoms, and over 100 therapies were mentioned in the meeting or in the docket comments. They also mentioned a range of diagnostic tools and biomarkers that their clinicians use to help treat their condition. They talked about the varying degree of effectiveness of their treatments and how their treatments are often associated with bothersome side effects, which can exacerbate other aspects of their disease, making treatment a very complex endeavor. They are desperate for research and development of CFS and ME treatments, at a minimum to better relieve their most significant symptoms, but ideally to address the underlying cause or causes of their disease. Okay. I'm going to get into a little bit of some specific things. I'm going to start with the cognitive impairment because that's what they started with. That's what they wanted to talk about the most. As some mentioned, it was the most debilitating. That sort of set of symptoms is the most debilitating that many feel. They use general terms, the brain fog, the impaired executive functioning, and then they talked about specific manifestations, the disorientation, inability to process information, slowed reaction times, word finding difficulties, etc. They gave very concrete examples of the impact on day-to-day life, how they have to limit their concentration 15, 20 minutes a day or every other day in some cases. They reported having difficulty interacting with people or being in social situations and having decision-making be very stressful. Then there was, of course, fatigue. They used many words to describe fatigue and ranging in severity. Fatigue, lack of energy, weakness, exhaustion, feeling drained or difficulty recovering their strength, feeling tired but wired, and then in some cases feeling that extreme and bone-crushing fatigue. They describe the specific impacts that limit their ability to walk, to climb stairs, to stand, to take care of their personal hygiene needs. And they commented that the inability to be active further exacerbates their weakness, pain, and fatigue. Many talked about sleep dysfunction, both as having an impact on its own, but how it exacerbates the other effects that they feel in their day-to-day life. They talked about suffering from insomnia, sleep disruptions, having difficulty staying asleep, or waking up feeling unrefreshed or not rested. They described how sleep quality can exacerbate fatigue and their other symptoms. And they mentioned that it doesn't matter how much sleep they can get. They can get 10, 12 more hours of sleep, still wake up feeling unrefreshed. And if they sleep less than that, then the day's going to be even worse. They commented on the challenge of finding treatments that can help them sleep without exacerbating their fatigue. Chronic pain was another symptom talked about in great detail, varying degrees and varying types. Muscle burning, muscle spasms, joint pain, pain in the eyes, pain behind the eyes, neck pain, nerve pain, neuropathy. They talked about headaches and migraines, and then they talked about this whole body pain as well. They expressed concern about the lack of knowledge about the fundamental causes of their pain. And a few commented that they have fibromyalgia, but they didn't attribute all of their pain to that. They commented again on the challenge of finding the right treatments for their pain. Another of other symptoms, the sore throat, which as one indicated, it's not the normal type of sore throat, it's more an inflammatory response. Other flu-like symptoms, orthostatic intolerance, and other issues related to blood pressure drops, susceptibility to virus and other infections. The sensitivity to light, sound, temperature, and other stimuli. For some, this is their most debilitating set of symptoms, and it's all different types of stimuli that limits their ability to engage in social interactions or go outside. GI issues and vision problems. The crash, I'm not going to get into it in much detail because I see the little, my little timer slide going up. But the crash is the incapacitating exacerbation of all symptoms that can occur with even minimal exertion and without warning. If you read the report, you'll get the details that they talked about. We probed into this in some detail. For example, the difference between a physical crash and a cognitive crash, where the physical is your body feeling like you can't move, and the cognitive crash where your mind being that you can't think, and the different exacerbations of that. They describe the best days and worst days in great detail. And I have an excerpt from one of the surveys that was submitted to our docket where on the best days of the survey respondents, 67% could do light housework or could only work part-time or on some household tasks, versus 6% in the best days were bedbound. And it gets flipped during the worst days where 61% reported being bedbound on those days. The overall impact, you can get that in the report. It's as one summarized, we're operating at 25% of normal. That's how one summarized it. But they talked in great detail about the impact that it has on their ability to work, on their ability to engage in social activities, do the things they love. They commented on their isolation, financial difficulties, and their feelings of hopelessness, emptiness, and despair. So in conclusion, this meeting really reiterated that CFS and ME is a debilitating disease that can have a devastating impact on patients' lives. The patient input strengthens understanding of the specific symptoms that matter most to patients, the burden that this disease has on patients and their families, the range of treatments that are currently being used, and how well those treatments are currently meeting their needs. We have received positive feedback on the report and its value, both internally from FDA, from federal partners, and externally from the stakeholders themselves. Again, the key of success was the meaningful engagement and valuable input by the patients and the patient community. And with that, I will stop. I didn't get the 1-minute warning, so okay, I think I made it.
Thank you so much for that really helpful summary of the document, which the committee already has, thank goodness. Does anyone on the committee have any questions that they would like to ask Ms. Eggers before we, about this? I do have one question. I mean, if you have, this is a summary, do you have the primary data that the committee can have access to as well?
The primary data is in the form of a transcript which is available, and public docket comments. One challenge is that not all the public docket comments were actually put on the website, so I would have to look into seeing how, if and how we can make those accessible to you, but that's the raw data.
Lily?
I just had a short comment. So Dr. Eggers, she gave some of the results of this survey up there regarding best and worst days. And if the committee wants that data, Dr. Jason and I conducted that survey and we can share it with the committee.
Yeah, if I could make one, I didn't mention it in the slides, but 2 of the submissions to the docket comments were surveys that were conducted by by patient stakeholders and submitted to us through the docket, and we treated them as a piece of input, like the docket comments.
Thank you. I noticed that you were involved in that, so thank you very much. Nancy?
Just another comment that came up at the FDA meeting is that the Patients Like Me site also has a huge data set on symptoms and severity and even outcomes. So it's more than 7,000 patients, I think, right now on the Patients Like Me website.
Thank you. So thank you very much. That was really very, oh, sorry, Rick?
I'm sorry, I just had one quick question. You mentioned at the beginning of your presentation that there was a second report, more technical, that was in process. When will that be done, and will it be publicly available?
That one, when it is done, will be publicly available, and that will be a summary report of the second day of our workshop. So it's not a more detailed technical report of this meeting, it's of those more technical discussions, and that should be posted as soon as it's available, and it'll be on, I lost my slides, it'll be on that last, in the second bullet of the relevant links on that last page of my slide deck. It can be found there.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it. So the next section that we're going to is to hear from various advocacy groups. And let me say that I very much appreciate the generosity, both of those who are speaking with us virtually, as well as those who actually came here to speak with us. The first one is going to be by Gabby Klein, talking on behalf of Phoenix Rising.
Number followed by pound.
Let me also say that Carol Head, Charmian Proskauer, and Mary Schweitzer are here in person, and I will give them the opportunity to choose to come up and sit up in the front, or they can just come up when it's time for them to talk. Either way.